Hello and welcome to the Relax It's Retirement podcast with your host, Josh Leonard, where we talk about transitioning into retirement with intent. I'm Wendy McConnell. There's Josh. How are you today, Josh?
Wonderful, Wendy. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm feeling a little fancy today because it looks like we're starting with a quote.
Oh, I love quotes. Maybe too much. So I'll just lay it on you. I've had many great troubles in my life, most of which never happened. That's a quote by Mark Twain. I wanted to throw that one out there because during this podcast, we're going to talk about election concerns. So, we hear from clients a lot that, just that general concern around the election. What if this candidate, what if that candidate is elected? What does that mean for me in my retirement? And quite frankly, Wendy, I think many times those concerns are overblown, right? If
Okay.
this candidate's elected, the whole world's going to a hot place in a handbasket, and the opposing side says the same thing. As the Mark Twain quote cited, we're afraid of things that might not actually occur. I think another example that comes to mind is shark attacks, right? I mean, Wendy, you're by the beach, that salty beach that has sharks there, right?
The ocean is right
Yeah.
beyond the beach. Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing about lakes is there's not really sharks there, but so my shark danger is lower, but I think that's a common thing, right? People go to the ocean and they're afraid that they're going to be attacked by a shark. One in 3.7 million people are attacked by a shark.
Whoa, that is a little bit of people.
Yeah, that's really not like if you go on the family vacation once a year, your actual probability is pretty low. It's more likely that you get struck by lightning. So,
Wow.
I think that that's another thing because it's maybe a different environment. We're a little bit more fearful of it. Growing up in Western Pennsylvania, I think deer are a bigger danger, right? The probability of an American, so anywhere across the country, having a deer related auto accident is 1 in 116.
Okay.
So maybe we shouldn't be afraid of sharks, right? So let's frame things a little bit different, right? We don't see a deer and we're terrified, right? There's
I see a dark road with woods on either side, and I do get a little terrified. My husband has hit 3.5 in just like the last 5 years.
Whoa. How do you hit a half of a deer? Did someone hit it just before and it got sliced in half and then
No, but it along the same lines. Yeah, it was already in the road, and he did not see it.
oh,
He went over.
oh no.
So,
Oh,
and we've had a
um
lot of insurance claims.
okay. So I have two quick stories on deer because this is more relevant to elections than anything else, right? Um growing up in Western PA, I mean, there's certain times of the year that there is a deer danger. And
October, November.
yep, we are hitting that time. My parents' house, my childhood house, whenever I started driving, was pretty close to the turnpike, and one section of the road ran parallel to the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And the turnpike is not really a good place for deer. The one time I was driving along that section of the road, and a deer ran up from the turnpike up towards me, and I think it was already alarmed because I hit the brakes, switched into the other lane. I thought I gave it plenty of space. No, it kept running towards the car, and it seemed like slow motion at the time. I hit the deer, and it hit the passenger side light, and it kind of spun around, and I. I'm a little overly sensitive
Yeah.
sometimes with things. So I stopped the car right away and got out like I was, I have any medical background in deer. But it ran away before I even got out of the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
So story number 2.
Story number two, I was in a car accident later on of my own fault. I had actually just actually went off the road and got stuck in like a ditch. And I had to report that this was my own fault to the police and everything. And someone else told me after, like, why would you ever say that? the excuse this time of the year is there was a deer. And I thought, oh, that would have been a very reasonable excuse. But, I guess I like to think for better. I don't think that way. But, that was always amusing. So I always think of that anytime there's a car accident. Like, are people going to blame this on a deer? So good thing we did not diverge from the topic at all today, Wendy.
We never do that. So it's a
Um,
welcome change.
But I guess this reinforces the point, right? We're fearful of shark attacks, but we all have a couple stories relating to deer accidents. We could do a whole deer accident podcast, actually, and that might be a topic for the future. But let's
Yeah.
transition back to the election, right? We have to keep in mind, the news cycle is the news cycle, right? They're looking for headlines. They need that attention. And, with the recent presidential debate and all this, there's plenty of headlines to be made with that. I think what's important for us all to focus on is how this will impact us. So there are a lot of concerns around the economy and inflation, which seems to be slowing now, but we certainly don't want that to pick back up. Immigration is another hot button issue for folks. The best way to handle that seems to be something up for debate. And then getting the two parties to agree is a whole different thing outside of what we might all commonly agree on is the best way. I think women's rights, reproductive rights, this has been something, that is, well, it's been polarizing my whole adult life, but it's really been in the forefront after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Healthcare and prescription drugs is another one. I think most Americans are very frustrated with our healthcare system, the cost of it, sometimes the astronomical cost of drugs. These are real issues that we're facing.
So how are you going to fix them, Josh?
I'm not going to fix them.
Oh.
I also don't believe that one politician or the other is going to fix them either. I think what tends to happen around elections is we have short term volatility, right? If one candidate or the other is elected, there's this thought that all of a sudden they're president and everything they talked about on the campaign is going to happen day one, right? It's all going to happen, and the other branches of government are going to decide that it's a good idea too and follow their exact line. That is not the way that our government works, but what it does create in the stock market for your investments is some level of uncertainty during the election, and even transitioning into that new administration.
I remember clearly in 2016 when we woke up and found out that Donald Trump was elected president, which was a little bit of a surprise, I think. The markets took a nosedive, like 900 points, I think. But then it just bounced back immediately. Like it was so crazy.
And they went on a run, which was unexpected. Most people were looking at it saying, hey, he's sort of a volatile candidate, a very different candidate, which again is that uncertainty. So if he's elected, the markets will be uncertain. That will cause a decline. Rather, they rallied in the short term.
Yes, very quickly, because I was actually and I know you're going to yell at me for this. We were purchasing our house here by the ocean. And
Okay.
I was cashing out one of my funds for the future.
It wasn't a retirement fund, was it, Wendy?
Well, let's just go on to the next point. But yes, that's
Okay.
why I was watching it so closely.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Wendy, I think you've been doing a great job. Certainly, my goal with this podcast is not to endorse one candidate or the other.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Everyone has their entrenched thoughts and positions at this point. I don't think we're going to change that. I think that sort of reaction in a lot of our media, what we see on social media, is simply selling more advertising. It's not changing anyone's mind. No one is changing their positions. I think what we need to be prepared for is how this will actually impact our lives and worry about it appropriately. Again, going back to Mark Twain, like I've had many great troubles in my life. Most never happened. Well, let's not worry about things that aren't actually going to happen.
So are there things that we do need to worry about? What is it that we should be looking at from the long view?
Yeah, I think the most important is setting yourself up to navigate appropriately, right? So we've talked in the past about our three bucket approach. right? Anytime there's uncertainty, the best thing to have is cash in your pocket, right? Having maybe a little bit of extra cash. If you're more worried about the election and what might come, okay, instead of that 3 to 6 months worth of savings in our cash bucket, maybe we have 7 months or 8 months. By no means should we take everything out of the market and stuff it under our mattress. We still need our growth and income bucket. By having those three buckets set up, we know we have our short term cash. So even if inflation goes rampant again and we have car troubles, the roof leaks, and the water heater breaks, we can afford to pay for those things and continue on. Our income bucket, if we still have 6 to 10 years worth of income set aside there, even if the market takes a nosedive with a new candidate, we can be patient while the market recovers and readjusts to a new environment. Our growth bucket, well, if we have a 10-year plus timeline on that, again, we can be patient. So setting up that proper framework works. Go figure. No matter what happens, we're setting it up to produce a successful long term plan for us. I always say when clients are very concerned about what's going to happen with the stock market, with the election, I say, do me a favor. The day after the election day, look across the street at your neighbor's house that has a bunch of those Amazon boxes every day and see if they're still coming the next day. Because they will be, right? Like, we're not going to stop operating as a country if one candidate or the other is elected. I joke too with like Apple. Is Apple suddenly going to be like, oh, you know what? This guy or gal is president. We're going to stop selling cell phones. We're done.
Yeah.
That's not going to change. Slowly, what might impact a company like Apple is if there's higher tariffs from China. If there's higher tariffs from China coming in, okay, then they're going to have to adjust their business model, which is going to cost them in the short term. These companies are also thinking about these issues. It's not like they're suddenly surprised or they don't know of these issues here. They're making plans to adjust properly, and it tends to be the largest companies have more money to adjust more quickly.
So they have kind of a contingency plan, so to speak, for each outcome. They know what they're going to do for each outcome.
They're considering it and talking about it. I'm not saying that they're suddenly shifting all manufacturing to the US now, but they're probably saying, hey, this is a risk in our business and we need to be able to address it. The reality of manufacturing overseas too is that great, we might shift it from China, who Donald Trump has proposed like up to 60% tariffs on certain goods. We're going to shift that to Vietnam. That doesn't bring the jobs back here
Right.
at all. I think that, there's businesses that they have a lot of attorneys and analysts and strategists trying to figure these things out ahead of time. So the idea that they're going to suddenly go out of business is crazy, which would be you losing all value in those stocks. With that, though, in our growth bucket, we need to be diversified still. We certainly can't just own Apple stock and say, well, Josh said that they probably have some kind of plan in place, right? No, we need to be properly diversified like in any market. Again, fear is not a plan. So sometimes we hear from clients, I'm afraid of what's going on in the election. I'm just going to stuff everything under the mattress. That is not a real plan, right? That is you hiding. That's not going to help you in the long term. If inflation goes high again and you're not making any money on your money, that's going to hurt you more in the long term than any short term volatility related to the election.
It might make you feel better in the moment, but again, the goal is to live as long as possible, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think always in life, focusing on what we can control is very important as well. So, as a financial advisor, we always talk through things like budgeting. How much money are you spending? Well, if you're particularly worried about, let's say, inflation, maybe let's figure out ways to save money a little bit to hedge against that inflation. That's something that you can control. If you're wrong and inflation is slowing down and maybe doesn't impact you that much, well, what's the worst thing that happens there? You got a little extra money, so that's okay. Then you can spend it on something fun, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I had a flashback to when I went grocery shopping this week.
Oh, a painful flashback?
painful flashback. My 18 pack of eggs, which is normally 4.99, suddenly was 6.99,
Mm,
and I was not going to stand for that, Josh. See, the thing is, I need eggs, so I
okay.
have to pay it. I
Okay.
have to pay it. So I went right up to that customer service desk and I said, I would like an explanation. And they said, oh, they've lost so many chickens in the last 2 years because of bird flu. I said, okay. I mean, these things, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were gonna argue it. I was looking for more there,
Well,
Wendy.
what can I do? I can't argue it. That's the point. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah.
mean?
Do you
Um,
I guess my question back to you, just to prod at this, because this is gonna be fun for me, Wendy.
do I need eggs? Is
Did
that
the
what you
customer service did you expect the customer service person to really know a lot of detail as to why those eggs had increased in price?
She had to call the dairy department, and the dairy
Oh.
department let her know, and I just wanted them to know because they care
Oh, what
so.
does the dairy department have? Did the cows step on the chickens?
Yeah, it's in the
That
dairy
is the real
section. Eggs are in the dairy section, Josh. How much shopping do you do?
I think they're in the cooler section, right? I mean, I don't know. I
Cooler
guess that's
section.
dairy. It's
Dairy.
cooler. Well, I
It's
mean,
in dairy.
okay, 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 okay.
No,
I'll take it. I'll take it.
you just sold yourself out there, buddy. You don't do any of the grocery shopping.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah, I do. Have you heard of Instacart?
that means you don't do it.
No, I'm the late night grocery shopper. I'm
Okay,
the we need these things. I don't do big shoppings
okay.
typically, but I'm the so I've
You're
visited
the grab something and go guy.
the dairy section.
Yes. So, like I was saying, is I wanted them to know that I wasn't going to let them get away with it without some sort of challenge because they love when customers do that. They love to be challenged by customers. I just really felt the need to have my say, Josh.
Okay, understood, understood.
It made me feel better.
Eggs have been through surge wings are still very expensive
Yeah,
too. I enjoy wings.
but I don't need wings. I need eggs. You need eggs for cooking and baking and
Yeah, yeah, okay.
certain dishes, you know what I mean? Like, I could forgo the wings. My husband probably couldn't, but, I need to buy eggs.
Sometimes there are certain grocers that artificially lower the price on eggs to bring more customers in. So
Mm.
one potential solution would be, switch up the grocery store.
Yeah, I've tried to do all of that, and that means that I end up going to 2, 3, 4 different grocery stores, and that's a waste of time. So, Josh, I'm
Yeah, the
sorry.
incremental difference in prices spent in gas and time, or far exceeding it. We always joke like people will drive 20 miles to save 10 cents on gas. Well, you spent more money driving to go get the gas.
I'm sorry I hijacked the subject again. So,
No, no. Sometimes I'm quite amused by this.
so I amuse you? Is that what you say?
No,
Do you
no.
think I'm
It's
some
not
sort of
you. It's
clown?
we all do these things in different capacities. Like, shortly after Yana and I were married, my father-in-law FEMA, who had retired like 3 years prior, would come and visit us in Pittsburgh, and he would tell me like, you got to go to Aldi's for this, you got to go to this grocery store for that, and I'm like, I got like negative 10 minutes to go grocery shopping. So like that store that's there that has everything I need is the place that I'm going to get everything that I need.
Exactly.
So that was saving. I think we were on saving there. Yeah, if we can save some money, you know, that's good. Spending and savings, those kind of go hand in hand, right? We're not in most cases we're not going to suddenly start earning drastically more money, right? So we save or we spend. We adjust those two. I think if you're still working and you're concerned about the election, maybe you're 5 or 10 years out of retirement. So great, I got my bucket set up, but I'm not actually spending that money now. What can I do to be confident in my maybe 401k at work or whatever other investments? So let's take time tested approaches, right? The world's been ending millions of times, even in my life. The world's ending. Y2K, certainly technology all died during Y2K because I am not talking to you through a video monitor recording through 80 different devices.
Now, how
Um,
old were you when that took place?
I was young.
Yeah.
Just a wee baby. I was
Just a wee
13.
baby. Okay, so
13.
yeah,
Yeah.
you remember it then? Because I remember
Oh yeah, I
we were
do.
all holding our breath.
We went to Williamsburg. It was a family trip for New Year's. We went to Williamsburg, which was sort of a like a tongue-in-cheek joke that like, well, if everything we're in the right place. There's people that know how to live before
Historic
all this, right?
Williamsburg.
Yeah. The the problem is Williamsburg is actually kind of expensive. So if the ATMs and everything broke, you probably wouldn't have any money. I
You're
don't
out of
know.
luck.
My blacksmithing skills are pretty weak too.
Uh, I just remember being at a friend's party at her house, and us all just, like, waiting, like, you're like, "Happy New Year." I remember I called, like, my parents, I'm like, "All right, the phones are working, things are working."
Yeah, right. But the world was ending then, right? And it didn't. I think so. Through all of these times, we can take time tested approaches, right? If we're buying stocks, let's buy quality stocks. Let's not just buy one stock, let's buy several. Let's be diversified. What if we're wrong about one company? Enron at one time was considered a high quality stock. Well, in hindsight, now we know that
Oh,
maybe
those poor
it wasn't.
people.
But if that stock is less than 10% of your portfolio, it's not going to destroy your retirement. It's certainly a negative in your portfolio. But if it's only representing 10%, the most you can lose with a single company failure would be 10%. It's not going to drag the whole down. I think if you're still working, continuously contributing to your 401k and your savings plans are going to help you. That's dollar cost averaging. So incrementally putting a little bit in each and every pay period is going to cause that volatility around the election. Like you talked about in 2016, it dropped one day, it went back up for the next couple of days. Well, you're buying on a regular schedule. So it's going to even out over time.
Okay. So, quickly, let's talk about the scenarios for each outcome.
Yeah, I'm going to focus on sort of economic issues more than social or, pop star endorsements, any of that kind of stuff. Hashtag Taylor Swift. Just want to throw that in there, get some views up. Um,
And now
Continuing
you
on.
can use the hashtag in the show notes.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Twice as many people will listen to us talk now, Lindy. Yes. Um, I think that's about the 10th time we've cited Taylor Swift. So
I
we'll leave
wasn't
that.
doing it to get more views.
Oh, I am, right? It's the Taylor Swift economy.
I didn't
We have to all
realize.
participate. I pulled some highlights out here. Some of the things that candidates have talked about that aren't wild or lavish, but some of the things that could happen, not necessarily that they will, that we need to be mindful of. So, under a Trump administration, I think the TCJA or the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, aka the Trump tax cuts, would become permanent. That is something that he's talked about a lot. It's something that he's very proud of. So I think that would continue on. The other thing is tips and bonuses would be made tax exempt. Um, I'm not 100% sure why this became such an important issue, but
Yeah.
both candidates have been talking about it a lot. So maybe I missed something. If that gets rid of the 3% surcharge, Wendy, maybe we're all victors on that, but I don't think it will. Under Trump too, corporate tax rates would be lowered to 20% from 21%. I think the idea there is encouraging businesses to grow more, have a little less overhead for them. Social security benefits would be exempt from taxation, is something that he's talked about. And tariffs would be increased on all imported goods. And like I had said earlier in the show, the focus there is, all imports, but really heavily on China. So like
Okay.
60%. I think when I look through that list as a financial advisor, I would say, okay, so it sounds like a lot of cuts, right? A lot of decrease in revenue.
Right.
Typically, like if I said I was quitting my job, I would need to either have some money to sustain that. So it becomes a bit confusing there that we have a high level of debt and we're going to add more to it. Now, the idea, which has been a Republican idea for a while, is if we stimulate the economy enough, we can outgrow these deficits, right? 20 versus 21% of a larger pie is still more money, is the thought.
It was 35.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
So,
was. So it is already lower.
right.
That is correct. And I think also important with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the corporate tax rates were cut permanently due to budget constraints. Our personal tax cuts end in 2025. Um, so I think it would be, for a Trump administration, it would be important to renew those, since that's something that they've taken great pride in. It would be important to renew those for the American people as well. But keep in mind, this would also be a second term president.
Okay. So
Um,
what about if Harris were elected?
yeah, under Harris, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would be extended, or what they've talked about doing is for those making under 400,000. Um, so for a lot of folks, yeah,
Me.
yeah. Let's be honest here. That is a smaller portion of the American public.
Yeah.
So for most people, they would retain the current tax cuts. I think also this is important for those in retirement, because most folks in retirement are living on under $400,000 a year. Harris would seek to have tips also being exempt, not bonuses, just tips. So slightly different there. The top tax rate for those making over $400,000 if single, $450,000 if married filing joint, would go back up to 39.6%. So representing an increase there for higher earners. The Medicare surtax would increase from 3.8 to 5%.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so there is a 3.8% surtax for Medicare. This is what helps pay for Medicare in your wages. It's kind of built in there, and it's
Oh,
something that you're paying for.
so this is a deduction from our paycheck.
It is, yeah, yep.
Okay.
So this would be an increase.
This will be increased.
It would be increased, so we would have less money net. Um, so yeah, increasing any cost for people is typically not too popular.
No.
Taxpayers worth more than 100 million would pay a minimum tax of 25% on their income plus unrealized capital gains.
Can you help explain? Um,
100 million. I don't have it, and most of our listeners don't have it. Anyways, I think sometimes we hear tax increase and it stuns us, right?
well,
I think there is a dangerous precedent that could be set with something like this, that our capitalist society has encouraged investment in other businesses where we get tax breaks for doing so. And one of those is if we hold on to those shares of a business, we're not paying taxes. If we're just holding that ownership of a company, that's what a stock represents. This is saying for those with more than 100 million, you'd pay 25% tax on unrealized gains. I think the real issue with that, and where a lot of people get upset, is a stock can go way high and drop way low. So if you're paying taxes every time it goes high and then it goes low, are you going to get a corresponding deduction to even that out? It is volatile in nature. So paying a tax on something that you haven't realized yet seems sort of unfair. However, I think where this stems from is like Elon Musk, right? He bought Twitter utilizing his Tesla shares and leveraging those. He took out a loan using those as collateral, which caused no taxes. He didn't have to sell it. So there is no tax revenue generated from that. In fact, many loans are tax deductible. So I think that's where it stems from. Now, I think it's seen as we're taking from, ownership in companies, the benefits of that, and also just from people's savings that they're saving. I think that precedent is scary to folks that, hey, they're attacking our savings, right? We don't want to set that precedent. We want to encourage savings, and we do want to make it beneficial for folks.
what about real estate? This can't be used on your primary home, but it can on secondary and third and fourth and fifth homes, correct?
What can the
The
unrealized gain?
unrealized tax, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that would still be an unrealized gain as well, which I think a valuation, you bring up a good point. The valuation of real estate can be a lot more flexible, right?
Yeah, so but my point is this is not it's not the case when it comes to your primary residence, correct?
No, and there are tax deductions built in where most folks, even when they sell their primary residence, they won't be paying a capital gain.
Okay. Got it.
So that could be an overblown fear there as well, much as our shark attacks and deer, and you know,
Right.
um, I think that when we look at a budget where we're spending more than we're bringing in perpetually, I think Democrats' position is we want to retain the services that we're providing, so we need to come up with some more money. Historically, Republicans have been, hey, let's make things more lean and reduce taxes there, right? That's kind of been our two-party system. I think that's been very diluted here over the last 10 years and through COVID and
Yeah.
different things. But I think we still see some of that in, if we just break down the agenda without all the commentary around it. I think we kind of see that still in where they're standing. I think Harris, the other thing would be raising that corporate tax rate back up to 28%.
Right.
Um, again, looking for more revenue there. Is that going to be popular with lobbyists and businesses? No, not at all. And I think many people would argue that, hey, that's going to slow down the growth of business, which is supplying jobs and raising wages, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think also on this capital gains taxed at ordinary rates for those making more than $1 million. So if you're making more than $1 million, you're not really getting that tax benefit anymore.
Yeah.
Um, you're paying those capital gains at the same tax rate. I have a hard time believing that that would ever actually pass. But a campaign is one thing, and an administration is a different thing,
Yeah, these
right?
things all have to pass Congress.
I think that we get a lot of chatter and a lot less action.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to get through Congress, right? Go figure. The president doesn't actually make all the decisions in government. We have a multi-party system for a reason. I think that whatever party's elected, there will be some changes. I think they end up being a lot more subtle than we think. Even these really, really big bills that get passed through, if we think through healthcare reform, aka Obamacare, or the Trump tax cuts, none of that went through quickly. It wasn't like day one this happened. It was a slow and painful process where they bartered back and forth, and there was certain exemptions and other things that got put into these. Um, so I don't think anyone's going to change anything overnight, which is why let's not freak out around the election. Let's be patient. Let's stick with our long-term plan. I think the social impact, the feeling of the country, the frustration with the direction of the country, those are things we hear a lot about. I don't think that's going to go away whether one party or another, or one candidate or another is elected. I think those issues are probably more important than the direct economic or impact to your retirement.
So the to sum up, don't worry about things until you have to.
Yeah, listen to Mark Twain. You know,
Yeah.
worry about the deer, not about the sharks, right? So let's focus on our savings and our spending and things that are in our control rather than politicians and a vote that is probably going to be within 1% either way. So we can lose sleep over that all we want, but we're not really going to have all that much of an impact. I'm not saying don't vote. Let's be clear. Let's still vote. Let's do our civic duties here.
Everybody needs to vote.
Just vote. Yeah. I think more importantly, look at your local candidates. Studying political science, we all focus on the presidential election. We forget about all the other elections. I think for most of us, what happens in our local municipalities or towns actually impacts our lives a lot more. So being active locally is probably a lot more important. So if you want to spend a lot of time researching candidates, maybe figure out who's running for your local school board where your children go. Are you running for local office?
I'm running for town council.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's dig in here. What's the
Well,
issues here?
we're really short on time, so
Okay, that's a whole separate episode.
but I'm getting involved.
I was asked to join the city board of review here in St. Joseph, which reviews people's tax increases.
Okay.
Um, Man, have I felt like that's a civic duty. Like, no one's happy about a tax increase, but there is a logic to how it happens, and there are errors made. So the gig, the volunteer position, my civic duty is to review this, understand how it is, and then communicate that back to the people. But like many other things, we get very emotional around an increase of anything. Um, and on the first couple meetings I sat through prior to actually being on the board, I was quite amused at how many people complain about where they live and try to like undervalue their property, and then in the same breath are like, but I would never live anywhere else. You're like, wait. Okay, let's go back to logic here, right? This is our tax base. This is the voted. This is how it goes, right? This is the law. The law has been applied appropriately or not. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
But good luck.
Okay.
Do you have pins? I'll accept a pin or a mug.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll talk.
Okay. We'll talk off air. Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for the next episode, Wendy, we're going to talk about investor worries, which are now starting to shift from inflation to growth. So in that next episode, we'll talk about some concerns outside of the election, but also issues that might impact your retirement. For all of you listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us again. Hope you got some pertinent information about deer that you can help.
And sharks.
and Mark Twain. But if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. If you haven't checked us out on YouTube and see how big of a smile Wendy and I have with this little banter back and forth, make sure to do so. Subscribe on platforms, share with your friends and family. Until next time, retire with intent so you can make the most of your hard-earned money.